Let's get one thing straight from the start. When you step into your power, people feel it. Energy doesn't lie. Confidence doesn't whisper. It walks into the room and commands attention. You're not someone who begs, pleads, or chases. You are someone who chooses. And when you go quiet, when you go still, when you cut the noise and walk away without theatrics or second guessing, the silence becomes louder than any words ever could. See, silence from a strong woman doesn't just create absence. It creates impact. It forces reflection. It rewrites the story. And suddenly, everything that was once taken for granted is viewed through a different lens. The value that wasn't fully seen before becomes impossible to ignore. Not because you changed, but because you stopped overgiving. You stopped explaining. You stopped proving. And when you do that, the world adjusts to your new standard. It's not magic. It's self-respect. It's boundaries in action. And boundaries don't push people away. They reveal who is truly willing to meet you where you stand. That's what shifts the dynamic. Because you're not just sitting around hoping for validation. You're doing the inner work. You're rebuilding your focus. You're becoming so aligned with your worth that anyone who ever underestimated it starts to feel the loss in your absence. You didn't block the number. You didn't make a scene. You just stopped showing up where you weren't being seen. You removed your energy like a queen vacating a throne that was no longer honoring her crown. That silence, that space, it's not emptiness, it's power. It's grace. It's your evolution speaking louder than anything you could post, text, or explain. What happens when you disappear from someone's life with dignity and strength? It creates a void. A void only your presence can fill, not because you were needy, but because you were necessary. Because your energy is rare. Because you gave fully from a place of love, not lack. And when that kind of presence is gone, its absence echoes. So when they circle back, it's not by accident. It's not a coincidence. It's the gravitational pull of someone who elevated. Someone who grew. Someone who reclaimed her voice and stopped handing it over for free. And make no mistake, people come back not just because they miss you, but because they miss who they were when they had access to your light. But here's the twist: it's not about them coming back. It's about whether you've moved on. Whether the woman you've become still has room for the past. Whether you even recognize the version of yourself that once settled for crumbs. This isn't about revenge. It's about remembering who the hell you are. It's about walking so boldly in your truth that anything not aligned with it naturally falls away. So stand tall. Speak less. Let your absence teach what your presence once tolerated. You don't need to scream your worth. You embody it. And when you do, the world adjusts. Respect follows. And the ones who once wavered, they find themselves wondering how they lost something they never deserved to begin with. Now go out there and own your space. Don't chase. Don't wait. Don't shrink. Rise. Because your silence isn't weakness, it's a mirror. And when they look into it, all they see is who they could have become if they'd risen with you. Choose yourself. Again and again. Until it's no longer a decision. It's your identity. Silence isn't the absence of communication. It's the presence of power. When you go quiet, when you step back without making a scene, it creates a ripple effect that reaches deeper than any word you could have spoken. People underestimate the weight of silence because they think speaking louder is the way to be heard. But the truth is, when a woman stops explaining, justifying, or defending, her silence becomes the echo of everything she ever tolerated. It becomes the mirror that reflects the reality others refused to see when she was still speaking. You don't go silent out of weakness. You go silent out of wisdom. It's the choice to redirect energy that was being drained into something that fuels you. It's the shift from trying to prove your worth to standing firmly in it. Silence, in this way, isn't passive. It's intentional. It's you stepping into your own lane and no longer giving your attention to what can't honor you. And when that energy gets withdrawn, the absence is felt. Because it was never just words. It was presence, consistency, care, and loyalty that is suddenly gone. There's a difference between disappearing and detaching. Disappearing is reactionary. Detaching is strategic. When you go quiet, you're not trying to manipulate or get a response. You're not playing games. You're reclaiming your peace. You're no longer participating in a dynamic that required you to overextend. You've realized that constantly showing up for someone who remains uncertain only drains your soul. And now you're done investing where your value is overlooked. People always notice what's missing when the noise dies down. They notice what you used to do. The little things you thought they didn't see. The patience, the support, the presence that became background music to their life. When you go silent, you disrupt that rhythm. You take back the beat they were dancing to without even acknowledging it. And that disruption doesn't just cause confusion. It sparks reflection. Because now the question isn't, where did you go? It becomes, why didn't I realize what I had when it was right in front of me? Silence removes the distraction of defense. It leaves the other person to confront their own conscience without interruption. There are no texts to dissect, no arguments to deflect, no emotions to manipulate. Just space. Space that holds a different kind of weight. The kind that forces them to sit in their own discomfort, to question their decisions, to face the void that your presence once filled. And in that void, they start to see the truth. It wasn't just about what you said. It was about what you embodied. You see, a woman who chooses silence doesn't lack strength. She holds restraint. She knows her voice is valuable, and she no longer wastes it where it falls on deaf ears. Her silence is not emptiness. It is clarity. It's the moment she decides she's no longer responsible for fixing what someone else keeps breaking. It's the turning point where she stops showing up for someone who only learned to appreciate her when she was halfway out the door. And what they feel in your silence isn't just your absence. It's your decision, the decision to protect your energy, the decision to heal instead of chase, the decision to let them face themselves without your emotional labor. That's what lingers. Not the last message, not the final words, but the abrupt stop of someone who used to show up so completely, now gone without explanation. That's what echoes in their mind when the silence grows louder each day. You become unforgettable not by chasing, but by choosing yourself when it would have been easier to stay. Silence becomes the reminder that access to you is not a guarantee. It's a privilege. And when that access is removed, it becomes crystal clear just how much your presence shaped the atmosphere. You weren't just there. You held everything together, often without recognition. Now, without your energy stabilizing the dynamic, they're left with the chaos they created. Silence is power because it makes them sit with themselves. It takes away the chance to blame, project, or gaslight. It removes the outlet they use to avoid their own accountability. And in that stillness, they are left with nothing but their own voice, and that voice starts asking the hard questions. Silence demands introspection. It pulls back the curtain and reveals the truth: they had something solid, something rare, and they didn't know how to hold it. So when you step back and stop talking, it doesn't go unnoticed. It becomes a shift in the atmosphere. Something is different. Something is missing, and what's missing is you. Your peace, your power, your presence. The silence you created speaks volumes. It doesn't beg to be understood. It doesn't scream for attention. It just stands tall, unbothered, and undeniable, radiating the strength of someone who knows exactly what she brings to the table. Boundaries aren't walls. They're filters. They don't push people away. They reveal who is meant to stay. When you draw a line, when you say, "This is what I will and won't allow," you're not trying to be difficult, you're trying to be clear. And in that clarity, people show you exactly who they are. Some will respect it. Others will resist it. But either way, you'll get the truth. And that truth is what sets you free. Boundaries don't create distance. They create definition. They separate the genuine from the performative, the consistent from the convenient. The moment you enforce a boundary, you begin to see what someone's presence was really built on. Was it connection, or was it control? Was it love, or was it leverage? Because when you stop bending, stop overachieving, stop being the emotional cushion to someone else's inconsistency, the people around you are forced to choose evolve with you or fall back. And that moment of choice is everything. It's where masks fall off. It's where patterns are exposed. It's where real intention is no longer something you have to guess about. It becomes crystal clear through action or silence. You find out quickly who only stayed because they had easy access. Because when you stop overextending and ask for effort in return, those who were never invested to begin with fade. They start pulling back, not because you did something wrong, but because they were never there for the right reasons. Boundaries challenge entitlement. They confront comfort zones. They demand mutuality. And some people don't know how to exist in relationships where they don't hold the upper hand. That's why they disappear when you stand up for yourself. Not because you changed, but because you stopped settling. Boundaries trigger people who benefit from your lack of them. The moment you stop saying yes out of fear, guilt, or obligation, the ones who were using your silence as permission suddenly get uncomfortable. And that's the point. Boundaries aren't supposed to make everyone else comfortable. They're meant to make you safe, centered, and aligned. They teach others how to treat you, but more importantly, they teach you how to protect your peace. And when you no longer tolerate what drains you, You rise into a version of yourself that no longer accepts crumbs disguised as connection. It's not your job to convince anyone to respect your boundaries. That's not strength, that's self-abandonment. When you express what you need and someone dismisses it, mocks it, or punishes you for it, that's not love, that's control. Real connection listens. It leans in. It may not always get it right, but it never makes you feel wrong for having a standard. And when someone's first instinct is to resist your growth, that's all the clarity you need. Because love without respect isn't love. Attention without effort isn't commitment. And presence without consistency isn't connection. It's easy to be liked when you're agreeable, when you say yes, when you accommodate at your own expense. But being liked is not the goal. Being respected is. And respect is built through boundaries, through the quiet courage it takes to say, I won't keep bleeding just to keep the peace. That kind of strength doesn't always win popularity. It won't always feel good in the moment, but it builds a life where you no longer betray yourself just to feel temporarily accepted. You start living in alignment, not approval. And that's when everything changes. Some people will call you cold when you stop rescuing them from the consequences of their own behavior. They'll call you selfish when you stop making your needs invisible. They'll say you've changed when you stop tolerating disrespect under the disguise of love. But that's because your boundaries have disrupted the dynamic they once controlled. And if someone walks away because you refuse to shrink, that walk away is a gift. It's not rejection, it's redirection. It clears space for people who honor what the last person only exploited. Boundaries aren't punishments. They're self-respect in motion. They're not about shutting people out. They're about letting the right people in. People who show up, not just when it's easy, but when it matters. People who don't need to be begged for the bare minimum. People who don't disappear the moment you stop making everything convenient for them. And when you stand firm in your boundaries, you don't just change your relationships, you change your entire reality. You become a magnet for truth, for depth, for respect that doesn't need to be demanded because it's already there. You don't lose people when you set boundaries. You lose illusions. You lose the fantasy of who you hoped they were. And in that loss, you gain clarity. You gain peace. You gain freedom from the emotional loops that kept you stuck, overthinking, and undervaluing yourself. Boundaries pull you out of that chaos and back into your power. They remind you that your worth was never supposed to be negotiated in someone else's comfort zone. And the moment you accept that truth, you stop settling for almost, for maybe, for someday. You only accept yes. When you stand tall in your boundaries, you don't just protect your energy. You elevate your entire standard of living. You stop entertaining confusion. You stop begging for clarity. You stop apologizing for needing what every human deserves: respect, honesty, and consistency. And from that place of strength, the right people find you. Not because you chased them, but because your boundaries became the signal that only the strong, the mature, and the aligned can recognize and respect. Growth changes the narrative because it shifts the lens through which everything is seen. What once hurt you no longer holds the same weight. What once confused you becomes crystal clear. And the version of you that once tolerated what broke your peace no longer exists in the same way. Growth doesn't just heal wounds. It redefines the entire meaning of what happened. It gives context to the chaos. It turns pain into power and teaches you how to reclaim the parts of yourself that you once gave away too easily. You begin to see things as they are, not as you wished they would be. There's a quiet strength in no longer reacting the way you used to. In the past, silence might have been a sign of fear. Distance might have come from insecurity. But now, space is intentional. Now, silence is sacred. It's not about shutting down, it's about choosing what deserves your energy. That shift in response tells its own story. The woman who used to over-explain, who used to beg for clarity, who used to break herself into pieces just to keep the peace. She's no longer leading the story. A stronger, more grounded version has taken her place. The beauty of growth is that it changes how you see not just others, but yourself. You begin to realize you were never asking for too much. You were simply asking the wrong people. You weren't difficult, you were discerning. And now that you've done the inner work, the very things you used to question about yourself become your compass. Your needs are no longer negotiable. Your standards aren't up for debate. You walk differently, you speak differently, you respond with more clarity and less chaos. That's the kind of growth that rewrites every chapter you thought had already been written in ink. When you grow, the story doesn't end, it evolves. You no longer see the past as a failure but as a foundation. Every heartbreak, Every betrayal, every unanswered message becomes part of the plot that led to your becoming. And the more you step into your truth, the more you realize the power was never outside of you. It was never about fixing someone or proving your worth. It was about learning who you are when you stop giving your energy to people who only wanted access, not accountability. Growth rewrites the story because it takes your power back from the moments you thought you lost it. It shows you that healing isn't just about moving on. It's about rising up. About building a life so full of peace, purpose, and alignment that what once triggered you now teaches you. You no longer need closure. You no longer need validation. The growth itself becomes the closure. The peace you've created becomes the answer. And that answer isn't loud. It doesn't need to be. It simply exists in how you carry yourself now, no longer waiting to be seen because you see yourself. The people who once misunderstood you, dismissed you, or underestimated you, they'll see the shift, too. They may not say it, but they'll feel it. Because energy doesn't lie. Growth leaves a trail, and it's undeniable. When you stop showing up in old ways, when you no longer respond from old wounds, it changes the dynamic completely. You're no longer caught in emotional cycles. You're no longer proving, chasing, or settling. You've broken the pattern. And breaking the pattern is what changes the story. When you grow, your boundaries become unshakable. Not because you're rigid, but because you're clear. You don't have to scream to be heard. You don't have to beg to be respected. Your very presence becomes a statement of self-worth. People feel the shift in your energy and they notice the difference. You're no longer easy to access. You're no longer available for emotional labor that costs your peace. And when that happens, those who once took you for granted start to realize they were standing in front of someone rare. And they missed it. What once looked like silence now looks like strength. What once looked like distance now looks like discernment. And what once looked like rejection now looks like redirection. Growth doesn't always come with applause. Sometimes it comes with solitude. But it's in that solitude where you rebuild. Where you reconnect with yourself. Where you stop asking for answers outside of you and start listening to the wisdom within. That inner strength becomes the loudest voice in the room. Even when you say nothing at all. There's a different kind of power in being unbothered. Not because you don't care, but because you care too much about your own peace to entertain chaos. The old version of you would have tried harder. Would have explained more. Would have fought to be understood. But now you fight for your peace, your growth, your healing. That fight doesn't look like resistance. It looks like release. And that release is what sets you free from the cycle that once kept you small. The real glow up isn't in appearance. It's in how you carry yourself when you know what you bring to the table. When you no longer tolerate emotional breadcrumbs. When your worth is no longer tied to who stays or who leaves. Growth rewrites the story because it puts you at the center of it. Not someone else's validation, not someone else's approval. You stop being a character in someone else's narrative, and start becoming the author of your own. Reclaiming your power is not about becoming louder. It's about becoming rooted. It's the moment you stop waiting for someone else to choose you, and start choosing yourself with unwavering commitment. It's the shift from reacting to being intentional. From needing validation to living in alignment with your own truth. When you reclaim your power, the energy in every room you walk into changes. People feel it before you speak. They sense that you are no longer seeking approval, that your worth is not up for negotiation. That silent, internal transformation alters every dynamic around you. The most radical act of reclaiming power is no longer abandoning yourself. It's no longer dimming your light to make others feel more comfortable. You stop over-explaining your feelings. You stop asking for someone to meet you halfway when you've already walked their portion and yours. Reclaiming your power means pulling your energy back from everything and everyone who treated it as a convenience. You stop sacrificing your own peace in hopes of keeping something that wasn't rooted in respect to begin with. And once you do that, everything shifts. There's a quiet, grounded strength in knowing you can walk away. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. When you reclaim your power, you don't need to force anyone to understand you. You don't chase closure. You don't beg for clarity. You let people reveal themselves, and you respond accordingly. That kind of detachment doesn't come from bitterness. It comes from healing. You become less reactive, less desperate, less willing to entertain the emotional roller coasters that once kept you tied to confusion. Your peace becomes your priority, not a reward someone else has to give you. Reclaiming your power changes the dynamic because it flips the script. You're no longer waiting to be chosen. You've already chosen yourself. And when you do that, people start to interact with you differently. Some pull back because they can no longer manipulate or guilt you into compliance. Others lean in because they recognize your strength, not as a threat, but as something sacred. The shift in energy exposes who was benefiting from your disempowerment, and who is capable of meeting you at your new level. There's nothing more disruptive to an unbalanced dynamic than a woman who stops tolerating what once broke her. When you reclaim your power, you stop being easy to read, easy to sway, easy to control. You become a mirror, reflecting back to others what they bring into your space. You no longer explain away disrespect. You no longer negotiate with red flags. And that confidence, rooted not in ego but in deep self-awareness, forces others to confront what they brought to the table. People notice when you no longer carry the emotional weight of the relationship, when you stop being the fixer, when you stop absorbing blame just to keep the peace. Reclaiming your power means returning responsibility to where it belongs. It means drawing boundaries and holding them. It means recognizing that love without respect isn't love, it's possession. And you're no longer available for dynamics that confuse your value with your silence. That realization alone shatters cycles that have kept you small for far too long. Reclaiming your power isn't a moment. It's a series of choices. It's choosing not to reply to the text that once triggered you. It's choosing to walk away from what feels familiar but drains you. It's choosing to say no without guilt. It's choosing to believe in your worth, even when you're tempted to settle. These small, daily acts of self-respect add up. They realign your life with integrity. They remove the noise. And in that clarity, you find yourself again, not the version shaped by someone else's needs, but the one that was always meant to rise. The shift in your energy when you reclaim your power is unmistakable. You're no longer emotionally available to confusion. You're not entertaining people who only show up when it's convenient. You no longer romanticize inconsistency. You see it, you call it, and you walk away from it. That decisiveness is powerful, not because it's aggressive, but because it's grounded in truth. And the truth is, you were never meant to shrink to be loved. You were meant to stand tall and be seen in your wholeness. This transformation makes others uncomfortable, especially those who thrived when you doubted yourself. But you don't shrink to soothe egos anymore. You don't make yourself small to avoid conflict. You've learned that conflict isn't always a bad thing. Sometimes it's the birthplace of your boundaries. You're no longer afraid to be misunderstood, because you finally understand yourself, and that understanding is enough. It anchors you when others try to challenge your growth. It reminds you that you are not here to be consumed. You are here to be respected. When you reclaim your power, you stop chasing what was never meant for you. You stop grieving people who left, not because they didn't love you, but because they couldn't stand the strength you stepped into. You rise out of old versions of yourself and realize that the real loss wasn't their absence. It was all the times you forgot your own worth trying to earn theirs. And now, with every step you take forward, you make it clear, you're no longer available for anything less than what honors the woman you've become.